Titus Robertson was a man carved from ice, untouchable, unreadable, and utterly intimidating. As the CEO of Robertson Enterprises, he held power over an empire built on numbers, investments, and ruthless decision-making. His piercing blue eyes, sharp jawline, and towering frame made him the object of fascination for many women in the workplace. But admiration meant nothing to him. He saw emotions as a distraction, relationships as liabilities. To his employees, he was a Greek god made of marble. Beautiful, but cold. While many saw his wealth and power as desirable, his reality was much lonelier. He didn't believe in love, in friendships, or in the need for personal connection. All he needed were results, and anything, or anyone, who failed to meet expectations was easily discarded. No one challenged him. No one dared to. Except for Amber Morris. Not because she wanted to, but because she simply didn't care about anything other than numbers. Amber Morris was not like the other women at Robertson Enterprises. While others in the office gossiped, flirted, and tried to catch the CEO's attention, Amber had only one love: data. She worked in the accounting department, surrounded by spreadsheets, financial reports, and intricate formulas. Numbers made sense to her in a way that people never did. She could predict market trends, identify fraud in a heartbeat, and optimize company spending with uncanny precision. Her analytical mind made her one of the best employees in the company, but she never sought recognition. She was content in her small but close-knit social circle of accountants who shared her love for calculations and financial strategy. Romance had never interested her. She found relationships messy, unpredictable, things that couldn't be controlled like an equation. While others swooned over Titus Robertson, she barely acknowledged his presence. That is, until the day their worlds collided. The annual Employee Appreciation Day was an event that Amber would have much rather skipped. Large crowds, forced conversations, and unnecessary socializing weren't her idea of a good time. She had planned to stay in her office, finishing up a financial report. But Miley, her ever-determined best friend, had other ideas. "Come on, Amber, you never have fun," Miley whined, grabbing her wrist. "One night won't kill you." Amber sighed but allowed herself to be pulled into the grand event hall. The company had spared no expense: lavish decorations, an open bar, and a DJ playing music that had most of the employees dancing and laughing. Amber stood stiffly at the edge of the dance floor, arms crossed. She felt out of place, like a machine placed in the middle of chaos. Miley, always the social butterfly, twirled in front of her. "You can't just stand there. One dance and I'll leave you alone," Miley begged. Amber hesitated. Numbers she could control, but dancing, that was unpredictable, messy. But Miley wouldn't take no for an answer. With a determined grin, she pulled Amber onto the dance floor. At first, Amber felt awkward, her movements stiff, but Miley spun her around and laughed. Slowly, Amber started to relax. For the first time in a long time, she let go. She was actually having fun. Then the room tilted. A strange dizziness swept over her, making her vision blur. The music pounded too loudly in her ears. She tried to reach for Miley, but her voice wouldn't come out over the bass. Her legs gave out, and then darkness. The last thing she heard was the panicked voices around her before everything faded away. Amber drifted between consciousness and sleep, her mind hazy, her body heavy. She could hear muffled voices, but they felt distant, like echoes bouncing through a tunnel. She groaned, trying to force herself awake. "Why am I dreaming about my boss?" she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Images of Titus Robertson flashed through her mind, his sharp, chiseled features, piercing blue eyes, and that imposing presence that made the entire office tremble. A Greek god. That's what the women at work called him. She never cared, never paid attention to the ridiculous infatuation they had with him. Yet here he was. In her head. And worse, his scent was in her nose. That clean, expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "Oh, please wake up," she groaned, still muttering to herself. "I don't want that man in my head." "Wake up, Amber. Focus. Think about something else." "Yes, the Hong Kong merger, the data analysis, the reports. Let's focus." Her brow furrowed as she tried to push through the fog, but that scent still clung to her senses. Ugh, why do I still smell my boss? How gross. She jolted awake, and Titus Robertson was standing over her. Her eyes went wide in horror. The entire dance floor had gone silent, and all eyes were on her. She was lying flat on her back, surrounded by concerned faces. Miley knelt beside her, biting her lip anxiously, while Titus, the untouchable, unreadable CEO, was staring down at her with a furrowed brow. "Amber?" Miley asked. "Are you all right?" She tried to sit up, but the moment she lifted her head, the world spun violently. She groaned, gripping her temples. To everyone's surprise, including Amber's, Titus bent down and scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Amber's brain short-circuited. "What? Wait, put me down," she stammered, her face flaming with embarrassment. "You can't even stand up," Titus said coolly, his deep voice laced with something unreadable. "Don't argue." Too stunned to protest, Amber buried her burning face against his expensive suit as he carried her through the crowd, straight to her private suite. Amber sat on the edge of the bed, frowning as the company doctor explained her condition. "You have a severe allergic reaction," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Given the symptoms, dizziness, fainting, weakness, it's likely something in the environment triggered it. Have you changed perfumes? Eaten anything new?" Amber shook her head. "I've never had problems before today." The doctor sighed. "Well, it's best you stay in bed for a few days until you can walk properly. Your body needs rest to recover." Amber groaned. "Rest?" She didn't have time for that. "But I have work." "No work," the doctor interrupted firmly. "You need to avoid stress." Amber scowled. Stress was part of her daily routine. "How am I getting home?" she asked, rubbing her temples. Before Miley could offer a suggestion, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the room. "You'll stay here." Amber's head snapped up to see Titus Robertson standing near the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. His tone left no room for debate. Amber blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're in no condition to travel," he said, eyes sharp. "The guest bedroom is available. You'll stay until you recover." Amber scoffed, pushing herself off the bed. "I appreciate the offer, but I can." The second her feet hit the ground, dizziness swept over her. The room spun, and she lost her balance. Titus caught her before she could collapse. "Like I said," he murmured, his voice laced with impatience. "You're staying." Too weak to argue, Amber grudgingly accepted her fate. But she didn't waste time. Propped up on pillows, she pulled out her laptop and resumed work on the Hong Kong merger, only to find herself struggling to focus. Her normally sharp mind felt sluggish, and reading numbers on the screen made her head ache. Titus noticed. With a heavy sigh, he reached over and shut her laptop. "No work," he ordered. Amber glared. "You can't just—" "I can," he said flatly, "and I will." To her absolute shock, Titus checked on her every morning and evening. He ensured she received her medication, arranged for meals to be brought to her, and even had her bedding changed daily. Amber had never received this kind of attention before, especially from someone like Titus Robertson, and she wasn't sure what to make of it. By the third day, Amber's anxiety had reached its peak. She wasn't used to being idle. Since her father passed away, work had been her lifeline, keeping her mind occupied and her emotions buried. Now, trapped in this house with nothing but time, everything she had suppressed for years began to resurface. That evening, Titus came home early. He had a long day at the office, but something nagged at him to return before sunset. As he stepped inside, he noticed the house was quiet, except for a voice, a beautiful voice. Titus froze by the door. Amber sat on the floor next to the sofa, her knees pulled to her chest as she sang softly. Her voice was haunting, filled with so much raw emotion that it sent chills through him. It had been years since he had heard a voice like that. His mother. Memories flooded his mind. His mother used to sing like that, soft, soulful, with an aching beauty that could make the world stop. She had passed away when he was in high school, and since then, he had locked away every emotion tied to her, until now. Amber's song faded into silence. She sniffled, wiping her eyes before speaking in a shaky voice. Daddy, I miss you so much. Titus stiffened. I'm overwhelmed right now, and I don't have your strong arms to hold me. I'm so lonely. What am I gonna do? I need someone to hold me. Titus's chest tightened. Before he could think, he moved toward her, kneeling down and scooping her up off the floor. Amber gasped in surprise as he wrapped his strong arms around her, pulling her into his chest. He didn't say a word, just held her, letting her cry against him. For the first time in years, Titus didn't resist the urge to comfort someone. Amber clung to him, her body shaking with silent sobs, and he let her. When her tears finally stopped, she pulled away slightly, sniffling. I'm sorry, she whispered, and thank you. Titus stood up abruptly, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he turned and disappeared into his room, leaving Amber sitting there, wondering what had just happened. Amber woke up to the warm, familiar scent of something she hadn't smelled in years. Cheesy biscuits. The kind her mother used to make when she was feeling down. Her heart skipped a beat. She blinked, her body still sluggish, and rolled over to see a familiar, comforting face. Hi, baby girl, her mother Charlotte said, smiling gently. I'm here. Everything will be all right. Tears filled Amber's eyes as she threw herself into her mother's arms, holding her as tightly as she could. The dam she had been holding back for days finally broke, and she sobbed freely. At the door, Titus stood silently, watching. He wasn't the type to be sentimental, but something about the moment struck him. He had seen Amber struggle, watched her push herself to the point of exhaustion. And now, seeing her cry in her mother's embrace, he knew he had made the right decision in flying Charlotte in. Amber tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible. Panic flickered across her face as she touched her throat. Mom, what's wrong with my voice? She rasped. Titus immediately called the company doctor. Within minutes, the doctor arrived and checked Amber over. This is common, he reassured them. Your body has been under a lot of stress. Have you been resting like I advised? Amber's guilty expression answered for her. The doctor sighed. That's what I thought. Your vocal cords are strained and your body is exhausted. I'm going to prescribe something to help you relax. Amber shook her head, silently protesting. Instead, she pointed at her mother. Charlotte turned to the doctor. Can I spend the day with her first? I want to help calm her down before she takes anything. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. All right, but she needs real rest tonight. Titus exhaled. He knew getting Amber to slow down was like trying to stop a speeding train. The next morning, he decided to work from home. He wanted to make sure Charlotte was comfortable staying in his house and that Amber was properly cared for. While Titus and Charlotte sat in the living room, they found themselves talking. It started casually, but then Charlotte opened up about Amber's struggles. Amber's always been strong, Charlotte admitted. But when her father passed, she lost her anchor. He was the one who kept her steady, and without him, she buried herself in work to cope. Titus listened intently. He had suspicious Charlotte detected Amber used work as a shield, but hearing it from her mother made it real. Just then, Amber staggered into the room. Her eyes were half-lidded, her movements slow and uncoordinated, clearly a side effect of the medication. Before Titus could react, Amber plopped onto the sofa right next to him. And then, without warning, she grabbed a throw pillow and laid across his lap. Titus froze, his entire body stiffening. Amber didn't react. She didn't move. She just lay there, completely dazed. Titus glanced at Charlotte, panicked. What just happened? Charlotte burst into laughter. Titus frowned, nudging Amber gently. Amber? No response. He called her name again. Still nothing. She was out. Charlotte laughed harder. Oh, this is going in the family photo album. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of a stunned Titus with a sleeping Amber sprawled across his lap. Titus shot her a glare. Help me, Charlotte grinned mischievously. Instead of helping, she casually walked over and took Titus's phone and tablet from the table. His eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Charlotte smiled sweetly. Being a mother. Titus sighed. Charlotte, you was up before daybreak, Titus. You need rest too. I don't need. Charlotte held up a hand. No arguing. Take a nap. Before he could protest further, she walked out of the room, leaving him stuck with a sleeping Amber, still stretched across his lap. Titus let out a frustrated sigh. For the first time in years, he had completely lost control of the situation. Charlotte checked in on Titus a little later and found him asleep, a rare sight. She smiled, satisfied that both he and Amber were finally resting. Letting them be, she went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. An hour later, the front door to the penthouse opened, and in walked Carl Smith, Titus's attorney, accompanied by Tori Cannon, a tall, impeccably dressed woman with an air of authority and barely concealed anger simmering beneath her sharp gaze. Hearing voices, Charlotte stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Tori's eyes immediately landed on the sofa, where Amber was still asleep, draped across Titus's lap. Her face twisted in fury. "What is this?" Tori snapped. Charlotte arched an eyebrow. "Keep your voice down. They are resting." Tori's nostrils flared. "And who exactly are you to tell me what to do?" Charlotte crossed her arms. "I'm Amber's mother. Now who are you and why are you speaking to me like that?" Carl stepped forward, looking mildly uncomfortable. "I'm Carl Smith, Titus's attorney. I've been trying to reach him for over an hour." Charlotte shrugged. "His phone is in his study. I made him take a nap." Tori let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Did you make her take a nap with him too?" She gestured toward Amber, who was still deep in sleep. Charlotte chuckled. "That was not my idea." But Tori's expression darkened. She took a step closer, her voice dropping into a low, menacing tone. "Titus and I have history," she said. "And if that person," she threw a glare at Amber, "doesn't get off him, she'll regret it. Her life will become a nightmare." Silence fell over the room. Charlotte's eyes sharpened as she took a slow, deliberate step forward. "Are you threatening my daughter?" Tori smirked. "I don't do threats. I carry out promises. You don't know me." Charlotte stepped even closer, now toe-to-toe with Tori, their gazes locked in a silent battle of wills. "No, my dear," Charlotte said in a cool, unwavering tone. "You don't know me." Without breaking eye contact, Charlotte pulled out her phone and swiftly sent a text message. A second later, her phone rang. She answered with one word, "Daddy." Tori's smirk faltered. Charlotte held the phone to her ear, her voice calm as she spoke. "Daddy." On the other end, a deep, authoritative voice responded instantly. "Tori, I need you to leave, right now." Tori's face paled slightly, her lips parting in shock. "What do you mean?" she asked, a nervous edge creeping into her voice. Charlotte watched as her father's words sank in. Tori shook her head, regaining some of her bravado. "This woman, Amber, is trying to steal Titus from me. But Daddy." "Now, Tori," Tori huffed, her anger barely contained. She glared at Charlotte before snapping, "This isn't over." Without another word, she stormed out of the room, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. As soon as the door slammed shut, Carl turned to Charlotte, looking completely astonished. "Okay," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I have 3 questions." Charlotte raised an amused brow. "And what are those, Carl?" Carl ticked them off on his fingers. 1. How did you get Titus Robertson to take a nap in the middle of the day? Charlotte smirked. "A mother's persistence," Carl continued. 2. How did you manage to keep him away from his phone? Charlotte laughed softly. "He was trapped." Carl chuckled, shaking his head. "And 3. Can we have dinner?" Charlotte smiled. "Yes." Meanwhile, Amber stirred on the couch, still groggy from the medication. Her face scrunched up as she sniffed the air. "Why does my boss's scent keep following me?" she mumbled sleepily. Charlotte, arms crossed, grinned knowingly. "Maybe because you're laying in his lap." Amber's eyes snapped open. "No," she gasped, her entire body jolting awake. Charlotte nodded matter-of-factly. "Yes." Amber froze, her brain taking a second to process. Then she panicked. She tried to move, but Titus's arm, still resting firmly around her waist, tightened, preventing her escape. Amber's heart rate skyrocketed. No, 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 this can't be happening," she muttered frantically, trying once again to wriggle free. At that moment, Titus lifted his head, his voice husky from sleep. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his deep voice sending an unexpected shiver down Amber's spine. Amber froze again. "Oh no. Need to, get up?" she squeaked, still avoiding eye contact. Titus eyed her lazily, then simply held her tighter. We need to talk. Amber, not liking where this was going, immediately attempted to roll away again. But that was a bad move. She was firmly trapped. Mom, help me, she croaked, desperate, but her voice was still hoarse from before. Charlotte, clearly enjoying the moment, simply patted Carl's arm. Let's go to the kitchen, she said smoothly. They need to talk. Carl smirked. Yeah, I wouldn't want to get in the way of that. As they walked off, Amber could still be heard muttering in complete disbelief. No, 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 this cannot be happening. Titus just smirked, watching her squirm. This was going to be interesting, he said to himself. Amber sat stiffly, her heart pounding in her chest as Titus's intense gaze locked onto hers. She had spent the last several years avoiding emotional entanglements, yet here she was, wrapped in his arms, completely cornered. And then, he spoke. You're wonderful, Amber. Amber blinked rapidly, her mind struggling to process his words. What? Titus smirked at her stunned expression but continued. You're amazing. Amber felt her cheeks warm, but her brain short-circuited before she could form a coherent response. Titus took that as his cue to keep talking. I've spent most of my life keeping people at a distance, he admitted, his voice quieter now, more reflective. After my mother died, He exhaled as if trying to find the right words. I stopped letting myself care too much. It was easier, cleaner, no emotions, no attachments. Amber, despite her embarrassment, listened closely. But you? His blue eyes softened, something rare flickering in them. You don't try to impress me. You're direct, brutally honest, and you don't fall over yourself like most people do around me. You don't treat me like a Greek god. Amber swallowed hard. She had no idea how to respond. Titus leaned in slightly, his voice lower, more personal. And whether you want to admit it or not, you feel something for me. His lips quirked into a knowing smirk. Maybe your head and heart haven't recognized it yet, but it's there. Amber turned bright red, absolutely mortified. Before she could try and deny everything, Charlotte's voice called out from the dining room. Dinner's ready. Amber nearly sighed in relief. Titus, still completely composed, gave her one last look before letting her go. We'll talk more, he said smoothly, standing up. In a few days, when your voice has cleared. Amber groaned internally. She wasn't sure if she was more frustrated by his confidence or the fact that he might actually be right. After dinner, Titus and Carl retreated to the study, glasses of whiskey in hand. The room was dimly lit, the scent of rich oak and aged liquor filling the air. Carl leaned back in his chair, studying his friend with a knowing smirk. So, he started, swirling his drink. What's going on between you and Amber? Titus let out a deep laugh, shaking his head. Honestly, I'm not really sure. Carl raised an eyebrow. You? Not sure? Titus sighed, staring at the amber liquid in his glass. She's different, Carl. Sweet, totally honest, quirky as hell, and her mind, God, her mind is incredible. He exhaled, a rare softness in his tone. And the craziest part? She makes me feel special, without even trying. Carl chuckled. That's a first. Titus smirked. I know, and I want to know more about her. Carl's face turned serious. And how do you think that's gonna go? Amber's not like Tori. She's not that strong when it comes to public scrutiny. You know the media will rip her apart. Tori will rip her apart. Are you ready for that? Titus's jaw tightened. We'll see how she feels about me in a few days when we can really talk. I just might get rejected. Carl laughed. You rejected? That would be a sight to see. Titus smirked, but didn't reply. Carl took another sip of his drink. Then his expression shifted. By the way, who exactly is Amber's mother? He shook his head, still amazed. Charlotte played Tori like a chess piece. I want to know how she pulled that off. Carl chuckled. I'm having dinner with her tomorrow. Maybe you'll get some answers. Carl nodded, intrigued. The next evening, Carl joined Charlotte for dinner. Conversation flowed easily, but Carl had one pressing question burning in his mind. He finally set down his wine glass and leaned forward. Charlotte, he said, studying her. How do you know Tori's father? Charlotte smiled slyly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. My full name, she said calmly, is Helen Charlotte Carmichael. Carl froze. A beat of silence passed before Charlotte continued. And my father is Samuel Davis Carmichael. Carl's hand slipped, nearly knocking over his wineglass. His eyes widened in shock. Carl sat in stunned silence before suddenly bursting into loud laughter. It was so unexpected that several people at nearby tables turned to stare. Carl shook his head, grinning in disbelief. That explains everything. The next morning, Carl walked into Titus's office, his expression unreadable. Titus, seated behind his sleek mahogany desk, leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. Well? He asked, his sharp eyes studying Carl. What did you learn? Carl hesitated for a brief moment before smirking. She's very secretive, he said vaguely. But we'll be going out again. I just need more time. Titus narrowed his eyes. Carl held up a hand. Trust me, Titus. This isn't the time for you to know everything just yet. Titus didn't like being kept in the dark, but he also trusted Carl. If he was holding back, there had to be a reason. Carl smoothly changed the subject. By the way, how long are those ladies staying at your place? Titus exhaled, tapping his pen against the desk. Amber should be well enough to leave soon, he admitted. Carl smirked. And do you want her to leave? Titus said nothing. Carl's grin widened. Maybe you can convince her mother to stay longer. Later that night, over dinner, Titus watched Charlotte carefully. He needed more time with Amber. If she left now, there was no guarantee he'd get the chance to have the conversation that had been lingering between them. After dinner, Titus finally spoke up. Charlotte, he started, setting down his glass, I need a favor. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, amused. A favor? From me? Titus gave her a rare, boyish smirk, something unfamiliar on his usually cold face. Can you convince Amber to stay a few more days? Charlotte's smile widened. Why? Titus hesitated, but then decided to be honest. Because I need to talk to her. I need her to understand how I feel, and if she leaves now, I might not get another chance. Charlotte studied him carefully. Then, after a moment, she nodded. All right, she said with a knowing smile. I'll take care of it. The next morning, the company doctor arrived to examine Amber one last time. After a thorough check, he smiled and said, You're cleared to go home. Amber's eyes lit up with excitement. She had been restless for days and couldn't wait to get back to her routine. Finally, she breathed, practically bouncing in place. But while Amber's heart soared, Titus's heart sank. She was leaving. He had hoped for more time, but now, reality was setting in. Just as Amber was making plans to pack, a sudden gasp filled the room. Oh dear, Charlotte yelped before falling dramatically to the floor. Amber and Titus both rushed to her side. The doctor quickly attended to Charlotte, gently inspecting her ankle. After a moment, he exhaled and said, It doesn't seem broken, but there could be some swelling. I'll wrap it, but you need to stay off your feet for a few days. Charlotte nodded innocently. Oh well, I guess we'll have to stay a bit longer. Amber frowned, concerned. Mom, are you sure you're okay? Titus helped Charlotte up, guiding her to a chair. As soon as Amber looked away, Charlotte leaned toward Titus and whispered, I bought you a couple of days. Make them count. Titus hid his smirk. That evening, after dinner, Titus took a deep breath and approached Amber. Join me in the study, he said. Amber hesitated. I need to check on my mom. Charlotte waved her off. I'm fine, sweetheart. The nurse is here. Go. Amber sighed but followed Titus, her steps uncertain. Inside the study, the air between them was thick with tension. They stood apart as if maintaining physical distance would make the conversation easier. Finally, Titus spoke. My feelings for you are real, Amber. His voice was steady, yet filled with vulnerability. I've never felt this way before, and I need to know how you feel. Be honest. Don't waver. Amber bit her lip, clearly battling with her emotions. Since that night you held me, she admitted, I've been seeing you differently. Titus's chest tightened with anticipation. But, she added, her voice softer, I'm afraid it might be for the wrong reason. Titus's brows furrowed. What do you mean? Amber hesitated. I don't want you to become a replacement for my dad. I was vulnerable that night. And now, I don't know if these feelings are real or just comfort. Titus exhaled slowly, nodding. He appreciated her honesty. Then let's not rush it, he suggested. Let's take our time. We'll get to know each other slowly and find out what's real. Amber looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of pressure, but there was none. Then she swallowed hard. There's something else, she admitted. Titus tilted his head. What is it? Amber twisted her fingers together. I've never actually dated anyone seriously. Titus blinked. What, I can't believe that. Why not? I've been on a lot of first dates, mostly setups, but none of them went anywhere. I never felt anything. She glanced at him nervously. So I don't really know how this works. Titus let out a low chuckle, his lips curling into a small smile. Well, he said, looks like we'll figure that out together. It was late in the evening when the penthouse door swung open and Tori Cannon strode in, her heels clicking against the floor with sharp precision. She didn't knock. She never did. Amber and Charlotte were seated in the living room, Amber sipping tea while Charlotte flipped through a book. The moment Tori saw them, her eyes darkened with irritation. She crossed her arms, her piercing gaze locked on Amber. Why are you still here? Amber tensed, but before she could answer, Titus appeared, stepping into the room with an air of quiet authority. I was going to ask you the same thing, he said coolly. Tori flipped her hair, turning to him with an exaggerated pout. We need to talk. Alone. Titus sighed, already knowing where this was headed. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here. Tori's eyes flickered with something unreadable, but she forced a smile. Fine. She turned to face him directly. Titus, I know things have been complicated, but you and I, we have history, she said smoothly. We belong together, and you know it. This, she gestured vaguely toward Amber, is just a distraction. Amber stiffened, but Titus spoke before she could react. Tori, he said firmly, I need to be honest with you. Tori arched a brow, crossing her arms. Go on. Titus took a deep breath. You and I are not together. We never were in the way you wanted us to be. Tori's jaw tightened. I've moved on, Titus continued, glancing briefly at Amber, and I want something real. Tori laughed coldly, her lips curling in amusement. Something real? With her? She scoffed, eyes narrowing at Amber like she was something insignificant. Amber shifted uncomfortably, but Charlotte's watchful gaze remained locked on Tori, as if anticipating her next move. Tori exhaled, composing herself. All right, Titus, she said smoothly. If that's your decision, I'll respect it. Titus nodded, relieved, but Charlotte wasn't fooled. There was something in Tori's eyes, something dangerous. She wasn't giving up. She was plotting. After throwing one last fake smile at Amber, Tori turned on her heel and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she paused and glanced over her shoulder. Oh, Amber? She said sweetly. Amber looked up warily. Tori's smile turned predatory. I'd watch my back if I were you. With that, she left, the door clicking shut behind her. Amber shivered, a feeling of unease settling in her chest. Charlotte sighed, shaking her head. Titus exhaled, rubbing his temple. That went about as well as I expected. Charlotte placed her book down and stood up. That woman isn't done, Titus, she said knowingly. She's going to come after Amber. Amber swallowed hard. Titus's jaw clenched. He wouldn't let that happen. Not on his watch. Weeks had passed since Tori's visit, and to everyone's surprise she had gone silent. No phone calls, no unexpected visits. Nothing. Amber had tried to ignore the lingering sense of unease, but Charlotte had other priorities. The gala was approaching, and Charlotte had one goal in mind: transforming Amber. Amber protested, but her mother was relentless. You've been hiding for too long, baby girl, Charlotte said, zipping up the elegant gown she had selected. Tonight, we show them who you really are. Amber stared at her reflection, barely recognizing herself. Charlotte had taken her simple, practical look and turned her into a vision of elegance. Her hair, normally in a messy bun, cascaded in soft waves, framing her delicate features. Her makeup was subtle but perfectly executed, enhancing her striking green eyes. The gown, a deep sapphire blue, hugged her figure gracefully, its fabric shimmering under the soft lighting. When she walked out of the dressing room, Titus turned and went completely still. For the first time in his life, he was speechless. Carl, who stood next to him, chuckled and nudged him lightly. "Close your mouth, man." Titus blinked, snapping out of his trance. He had always found Amber beautiful, but tonight she was breathtaking. He walked over to her, offering his arm. "You're stunning." Amber blushed, accepting his arm. Charlotte, standing proudly next to Carl, smiled at her daughter's transformation. The gala and Tori's revenge. The night was going smoothly until Tori made her move. While Amber and Titus were mingling with high-profile guests, the large event screen suddenly flashed a document. A hushed murmur spread through the crowd. Amber's resume appeared on display, followed by a university verification search showing no record of her ever attending the listed college. Tori's voice rang through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a liar among us." Amber froze. Whispers erupted. She lied on her resume? She faked her degree? Was she trying to trap Titus? Charlotte stepped forward, her eyes blazing with fury. But before she could reach Tori, Amber found her voice. "Tori is right." Silence rippled across the room. Titus's expression hardened, but he remained still. Amber lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the nervous pounding in her chest. "I wasn't truthful about my college history or my resume." A collective gasp filled the room. Tori smirked triumphantly. "See? I told you." "But," Amber continued, cutting Tori off, "it wasn't because I was after anyone. It was because I had to hide who I really am." Titus stared at her, unreadable. Amber turned to him, her green eyes locking onto his. "My real name is Rose Amber Lynn Carmichael," she revealed. A wave of shock hit the room. "I am the granddaughter of Samuel Davis Carmichael." The entire ballroom went still. Tori's smirk disappeared. Amber looked at Titus, her voice softening. "I had to hide my identity so I could live a normal life. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Titus remained silent for a moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he walked over and pulled Amber close. And laughed. Amber blinked, startled. "That's what had you so nervous?" Titus murmured, his deep voice laced with amusement. "Amber, you could have told me." He cupped her cheek, looking into her eyes. "It doesn't change anything." Tori, furious, looked around the room, expecting outrage, but instead, people were nodding with understanding. She turned to her father, James Cannon, who had watched the scene quietly. James sighed, walking over to Charlotte and Amber. "I owe you both an apology," he said with a tired smile. "And I assure you, I will deal with Tori, privately." Tori whipped her head toward her father. "What? Why is everyone siding with her?" James turned to his daughter, his expression firm. "Because, Tori," he said, his voice calm yet final, "the Carmichael family controls half the country's wealth." Tori's face drained of color. Amber wasn't just anyone, she was untouchable. And Tori had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Over the next year, everything changed, but in the best way possible. Titus offered Amber an executive position working closely with the CFO, recognizing her brilliance in data analysis and financial strategy. She had earned the board's respect, and soon after, they formally approved her relationship with Titus, making adjustments to the company's bylaws regarding workplace relationships. Titus, always 10 steps ahead, even added an amendment, one that would allow for a CEO and executive to marry without complications in the future. Charlotte, no longer needing to hide, moved in with Amber and began dating Carl, much to Titus's amusement. Meanwhile, James Cannon, true to his word, sent Tori out of the country, ensuring she wouldn't be a problem for a long time. Through it all, Titus and Amber took their relationship slow, building something solid and unshakable. But Titus had known since the night Amber stayed in his penthouse, since she curled up on his lap in that dazed state, that she was the one. And 18 months later, she was walking down the aisle, about to become his wife. As Amber stepped into view, Titus felt something tighten in his chest. She was exquisite, glowing in an elegant ivory gown that hugged her form perfectly. Her hair, swept up with delicate curls cascading around her face, made her look like a vision straight out of a dream. But it wasn't just her beauty that made his heart race. It was everything about her. The way she challenged him, the way she never tried to impress him, the way she made him feel like a man, not just a CEO. As she walked toward him, eyes locked onto his, Titus made himself a promise. He would protect her, cherish her, love her the way she deserved for the rest of his life. And when she reached him, standing face to face, he took her hands, smiled softly, and whispered, "Took you long enough to come down that aisle." Amber laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're impossible." Titus grinned. "And I can't wait to make you legally mine." And as the ceremony began, he knew, without a doubt, he had found his forever. Hope you enjoyed this love story by Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow by like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.